I love the concept of resilience because that's been sort of the theme of my entire life is how to stand up and have that courage to get through. And I think it takes something deep within ourselves, a commitment between ourselves and God to really step up when it gets tough and not be that person that collapsed. So I really appreciate what your platform is doing. And so I had two near death experiences. The first one was a blunt force trauma to the head. And it was in a very bad situation. And the Lord told me that I could choose whether to come or go. I went to the white light, the music, the beautiful peacefulness. It was just amazing. But I had little children at that time, and I chose to stay. But I woke up in a horrendous situation. And the next couple years was really trying to get through that situation. It's extremely difficult. But there's a saying that, so I brought up Christian. I am a Christian. And something that the Lord always says is be strong and of good courage. And that really struck me even from a teenager. I was not one that did drugs or got into alcohol and stuff, even though my friends did, because I really always picture myself standing in front of the Lord, and do I want to have that as something that I have to go through with him? And I adopted my first kids when I was 20. Went up against the court systems, how they decided to give a 20-year-old with no job custody of two children. I have no idea, but they did. I guess I made a great impression on them, and I got awarded the custody. My first two adopted children when I was 20 years old. They were 8 and 6. They're now 52 and 50. And so that, talk about resilience, that is resilience. At 20 years old, I had no idea how to handle that. They were sexually abused, physically abused, satanically abused. And so talk about a road to resilience that started. That really was the beginning of my resiliency, is when you're going to tell the Lord that you have courage, he's going to give you something to be courageous about. You cannot stand in the full power of God and say, I'm a courageous person, and then never stepped up to the plate to be courageous about anything. And courage just never comes in a lovely package. You know, when you're standing up to be courageous, it's always something difficult that you have to overcome. It's that pulling that strength from within yourself out. And that has been what has been required of me almost my entire life. My brother fell off a cliff when I was 8. He was 9. My younger sister had her head kicked in by a horse when I was in my senior year of high school. And so my life has been fraught with difficulties. I have not had an easy life, but I have had a wonderful life. I have hardly had a day where I have felt miserable all day long, because I have felt like this life that has been gifted me, it's mine to choose with what I do with it. And that strength within yourself with the Lord to say, you can rise above this, you can do this, tell yourself a different story. And I think that's where a lot of my life, why the two near death experiences have been such a huge effect on my life, is I've chose to tell myself a different story. And instead of woe is me, poor me, how am I going to get through this? It's changing the story. Is like, wow, this happened to me, but look, that hindsight is 2020. When you look back and see all the good that's come out of things, how that you've met people, you've had experiences, you're stronger. So that's where I really think that courage comes in, is when we are tested constantly all the time. And it's that testing and rise above it is where we get our strength from. So going back to the near-death experience, the first one that I had, I woke up into a nightmare situation with a mentally ill person that was attacking me. And I was in a state of shock with that for years. I had jumped outside of my body, like people when they do in traumatic events. And it took a long time for me to be settled back into my body. The second near death experience happened almost exactly 20 years later. And I had the swine flu. And all four lobes of my lung were filled with this horrible fluid. I was literally drowning. The fluid was gurgling up in my throat, and I just kept on going into the other world. And I couldn't stay in my body. And I would go into this, just the most, in the other world, everything is alive. Like you see, like the color, it has texture, it has sound, things are alive where you don't feel like they're alive here. And I kept on going to this beautiful blue, silvery, it's not a color that we have in this world, expansive space with the silhouette of an angel standing in front of me saying that it wasn't my time to go. And then the Lord was talking to me and saying, uh, after my first near death experience, I had made a commitment that to finish out my life doing the second commitment. I had two exit points. The first exit point was I could have chosen, and the second exit point was not now. So he was like, "You're not leaving. This isn't your time." And I was a doula, which is a birth assistant. I was a lactation consultant. At that point, I had 14 kids. Only 3 I gave birth to. The rest were adopted, foster, step. I have 34 grandchildren now. I have no idea how many I had back then. But so my life was completely full. Like I had this save the world mentality. I did essential oils. I did homeopathic medicine. But I never worked in that energy field. And so the Lord said I was to learn energy work. And then I was to do a hospice caretaker, and then something would come through me that would help change the world in some manner. And of course, I thought this was ridiculous. Like I'm just me. Like there's no way, and I couldn't even conceive of what was going to come through me. But I argued with the Lord quite a bit in the other world. I must have been there 30, 40 times. I mean, I could not, I was too ill to stay in my body in those 10 days. I just kept on bopping out, sometimes 3 times in an hour. And it's not your time to die. And they would give me this little shot of this, it's like liquid pearl color to drink in the other world. And it's just like your body is dying, but we have to keep you alive for this thing that you're meant to do. So, and then I wake back up in my body. But I was downloaded with a whole lot of information at the time. So when the Lord told me to do hospice, I was like, I bring babies into this world. I had never seen a dead person. When I thought of hospice, it was just conceiving of being with dead people. I didn't understand the whole concept. I told the Lord this was not for me. He said, yes, it is. I was like, no, it isn't. This isn't something I'm into. And finally I was like, okay. And so when I got healthy enough, I became a Reiki master teacher, learned reconnection, and then became a hospice caretaker. I loved it. There was something that was so unbelievably amazing being with someone who's transitioning into the other world. It was the most sacred, unbelievably beautiful thing to do. I even taught people to do hospice. There's a man named Daniel Brinkley who has written quite a few books, Saved by the Light. I forget the other, I think there's maybe 5 or 6 books all about his near-death experience. He was hit by lightning, died for 28 minutes the first time. I think he had 3 near-death experiences. And in it, he was told to do hospice and to start wellness centers. And so he started a hospice caretaking unit called the Twilight Brigade, where their motto is no veteran dies alone. So that's who trained me. he hadn't taught in 10 years, but when I was sitting there, it's the ability to actually take yourself out of it and realize the Lord can talk to you. And that's where the near death experience really was beneficial for me, because I actually could hear the Lord's voice. And we can hear the Lord's voice. You don't have to have a near death experience to it. It's about being able to be quiet your mind, get yourself in meditation. The Lord is constantly telling you to meditate. And what that is if you can learn to quiet that chatter, the Lord's voice is there. The angels will be able to speak to you. And at first it just appears like it's your voice talking. And then when you slowly get into it, you can hear that it's not your own voice. And so the Lord would tell me, like, get up. And he would show me a picture of a thrift store in my mind. And he said, just go. And I would just go. And he's like, go to the back of the room. There's books there. So I go to the back of the room. Just take the books off the shelf. Don't even bother looking at them. I get home and they were Daniel Brinkley's books. And so I read through, I think I got 3 of them, read through them right away, called up the thing. They just happened to have a hospice training thing down in Washington, D.C. I'm north of Philadelphia the following weekend, and just happened to have 2 spots available because someone canceled. So I got my sister to do it, and we went and trained to do hospice. All of this takes what the show is about is resilience. It's not about woe is me. Dying in the hospital from swine flu is a horrible, horrible experience. All my veins had collapsed. My organs were shutting down. I had a migraine in the left side of my neck at the base of my skull that was so excruciating that anything touched me, anyone said anything, you have the beeping of the machines all the time. So people look at near-death experience like, oh, isn't that, an amazing, without looking at the other side of it. Like, no, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And from the grace of God, you get to experience this going to the other world. So you can either walk away from that and saying, oh, look, poor me, I've had this horrible experience where you're just suffering for such a great long time, because it took a long time for me to recover from that. I had infection in the cavity of my, where my lungs are, on the lining of the outside of my lungs and in the inside. It affected my heart. It started affecting my organs. And so the recovery from that is excruciating. I couldn't breathe, the pain. But that's the resilience that you get, is you are able to step into something larger than yourself. And instead of saying, look, this was a horrible experience, then you turn around and say, look, I got to talk to God. That's what's, and so we can always tell ourselves a different story. I wasn't someone who wanted to go into hospice. And look, I got to be a hospice caretaker. That was the most amazing gift ever. To be able to be within, you have to drop everything of who you are before you step in that hospice room. And I did private in people's homes and in a hospital unit. And then you're stepping into the most sacred spot where the whole family is sitting around waiting for this person to pass, or this person is all by themselves passing on their own. And either of those things, you have to drop who you are, step into that sacred space, and be able to say the right things, do the right things, be that person that you need to be at that time. And that is resilience. But you have to have trust in the Lord that he will guide you and show you, have his words come through you. And that's what I've really found, is that if I let my own ego aside and let the Lord guide my life, sometimes it's not always lovely. You get near-death experiences and things like that. You get put in really tough situations because you got to show your mettle. You got to show you got to be strong and of good courage. And so it's not always the best situation. My husband just fell off the roof 2.5 years ago, fractured his pelvis, and from that had a massive stroke. So I had to teach him how to walk all over again, how to speak, how to do everything. It has not been an easy 2.5 years. It is like I've lost the man that I love more than anything else in the world, his body's still there, and slowly he's coming back. That takes resilience. It takes studying. It takes patience. But you know what's come out of it? I have married to the sweetest man I have ever met in my entire life. He has no more ego. He has no more anger. He sees everything as a little child. And so now I'm in my 60s and I get to experience just complete and utter innocence. And so I can either tell my story of, look, woe is me, isn't this horrible and difficult? It's sidetracking my life. Or I can say, look, I get gifted this most precious time that most people don't get to experience. Because when you've been with someone 35, 40 years, that we all fall into that sort of pattern of, he said this, she said that, you did this 20 years ago, whatever. And to be able to be gifted this whole new life is just a blessing.
Absolutely. And I can already imagine the way you're looking at it is just so fascinating to me, and I think it's something that we can definitely all take note of, and ideally learn for ourselves, because so often I would, maybe myself or everybody I know would think, well, this happened to me, why would this happen to me, why would I now have to go through this? One of the things that I wanted to zoom into was the recovery period after you had the swine flu. Because as you've said, it was awful. It was awful being in that hospital. And of course, once you were a bit better, you were discharged. But still, the play wasn't over. You still had a lot of recovery to do. And I bet that wasn't easy as well. Yeah. So you're a Christian woman. Have you ever wondered, or have you ever struggled with the thought of, why would an all-loving God have me go through this?
No, actually, I never have, because from a very young age, I understood that with freedom comes the good and the evil. So you can't actually be free if the Lord could control the negative aspects of life and only give you the good, because then why would you be here on earth to begin with? If the Lord's just controlling everything and not allowing any of the evil to manifest, then we would have just been born in heaven. But the whole point of being here on earth is that he's not controlling it. He will not come down and control your life. You can pray and you can ask for his guidance, and that's where the Lord can step in. He can't step in without your prayers. That's why prayer is so important. When my husband fell off the roof, I had prayer groups all over the country praying for him. And I was with him up until they took him to the operating room. They took and x-rayed his hips beforehand, in that basket, big part where your leg bone goes into his pelvis. It was about this far apart. You could see, and they were going to have to put 6-inch screws all through it to pull it together. This was 15 minutes before the surgery. He went into surgery and half of that had come together. They only need to put one screw in. The doctor came out and he said he had never seen anything like that. So within 15 minutes, that hip, the accident happened the day before. So it wasn't like it automatically happened. So we're talking 24, more than 24, 40, I'd say 28 hours later, this hip was completely still separated in half. The pelvis basket. And with all those prayers going forth, that the doctor said that's the only thing he could think of that would ever bring a hip like that together. So that's where prayer comes in, where the Lord can answer it. But the gift is we can do evil. It's as weird as that sounds, that's the biggest gift to us. That's why we're on earth, because we do have good and bad. What would it be like? Can you imagine if you felt like you would never feel like you had your own life and the Lord hand came and said, nope, you can't do that, plucked you out of it? What would be the point? And the whole point is to figure out who we are. And that's the resilience part. Like, do you want to stand in front of the Lord one day and say, I was a good and faithful servant. Because we all get to watch our actions in the other world. We get a life review. You did this. This is how it affects people. You did that, good and bad. And when I stand up there, I want to have more of the good than the bad. I do mess up. We all make mistakes, but that's not the point. And it's not the Lord judging us. It's the Lord saying, okay, it's like a teacher with a thing. So here's your math problems. Which did you do right? Which did you get wrong? It's not that the wrong was, bad you. You get to see where you stepped out of line, where maybe you could have been kinder or not said that thing. But you also get to experience every time you smiled at someone, every time you complimented them, every time you step up and became more of the Lord manifesting on this earth. So that's, I consider it the biggest blessing in the world, that the Lord allows those things to happen.
Absolutely. And I think there's so much that we can learn from this contrast, the fact that there's not just good and good things out there. And to be honest, if we had an easy life, if we never came across any challenges, then we probably wouldn't be a very strong person.
No.
Neither of us. We wouldn't be resilient. We wouldn't be courageous, because there's no fire that builds those traits up in you. Everything you've ever wanted is just handed to you. You just wish for something, it appears. Then it sounds like a very peaceful life, but it also doesn't really create a strong person in each of us.
No, and I've led many women's groups, healing meditation groups, you name it. And the people that I find shine the most are the ones that have had the toughest lives, that have overcome. And if you see, like, this world is in chaos right now, but what can you do to overcome it? So to circle back with near-death experience, what that manifested is I started a company called 11. That's ELEV3N.com. And what we do is connect holistic practitioners and clients together. So what did the Lord do when he was on the earth? He healed people, right? 90%, 95% of what Jesus did when he was on the earth was lay his hands on people and heal people. Well, how can we do that in this day and age? And that's been, so his prime directive for me has been to learn healing. And because if we don't feel healthy, think about it. If you're living a life and you get taken down by the swine flu, the bad cold, the flu, it doesn't matter. It's a terrible sore throat. You're laying in the bed. You don't care what's going on. You don't care what the world is doing. You don't care what the politicians are doing. You can hardly care what the rest of your family's doing. It's like, eat whatever, kids. Just don't bother me. So that's where I think this world has gotten to. We've gotten so sick mentally, physically, our earth, our sky, we're polluting everything everywhere. And so the Lord wants us to heal again. When you're feeling alive and healthy and vibrant, you're willing to take on the world. You're willing to go fight for the things that are right, to stop child trafficking and go up against the people. Like I fought, our county in Pennsylvania doesn't have fluoride in the water. Why? I was one of the people who fought against it in the 80s. It's like, dude, you can't put that toxic poison in here. I knew it was poison back then, only from the Lord, because there was no internet or anything. It's just things that I discovered on my own. It was like, nope. And so having a healing mind, a healed body, gives us the ability to go fight what isn't going right in this world. And so that's been my mission, I think, since I was little. And every time that it feels like I've fallen out of that, the Lord gives me some other tragedy to get over and then gives me more resilience to fight the next fight. It has never been like, oh, here's a cushy life. I'll give you a beautiful house with a pool and a car that runs well. No, that's not how it's been. It's been like, here, fight through this and see what it comes. And the most amazing things come. I have the best friends, the best family. I get to experience the most amazing things, like talking to you and being part of things. It is a blessing. It is absolutely a blessing, but it is not a soft, cushy life. And it's not like I'm doing what the Lord says, so therefore I get all these wonderful ramifications. The apostles all were killed in horrible ways. I hope that doesn't happen to me, but it's I don't think about that. I think about, what can I do to service humanity, to bring a smile to someone's face, for someone to sit next to the hospital bed of their loved ones passing in the other world and bring peace to them so they can lovingly guide the other person to the other world, is one of the most beautiful things. To be with a family as they're receiving the next being from the other world into this life as birth. Blessings. There's nothing that I would give up. None of the tragedies in my life would I give up not to have those things. If that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does. And because you brought up hospice, I know that a lot of the people that have worked in hospice care, they've learned so much, and everybody says it's just such a transcendental experience. And there's almost no way you can be around, in that line of work and not be affected as a person. And I think affected, but in a good way, and be impacted by it and become a better person for it. So I'm sure that you have lots of stories about your time in hospice. I was wondering if you can recall one of the most emotional moments that you've had that have impacted you emotionally.
There's two that come to mind instantly. One was, and it's interesting, they were both children. They were single children. One, there was a woman, and she had been crying for days. I hadn't been in the unit, and she was probably in her 70s, and her mother was in her 90s, but she could not accept that her mother was passing, and her mother was already in that coma state. And I just went and sat with her, and I didn't say anything to her for the longest time. I just sat. I was just witness to her grief and her sadness. And then slowly I started asking her to talk to me about her mother. And slowly she started talking about all the life she had, whether she was a good cook, what was her childhood like, where, all those experiences. And so then the person stops being just the sick person that's dying and the loss, and you're giving them back the entire life of what that person was. That they're more than just the dying person and the thing. And then I talked about my experience in the other world. And it took about 3 hours, but then she just got up and she sat. She wasn't crying anymore. And she goes, "Mom, you can go now. I love you." And she passed. As soon as the woman said that, she stopped. She took her last breath. And I've seen a lot of grief, but I had rarely seen that deep a grief in a human being. And we can't judge grief, whether, someone's has a child that's passing or someone else. Someone's grief is their grief. You can't say, well, the one was already 90 years old, of course she should be passing, you accept it. No, it's like that was her anchor to the world. Her mother was her best friend her entire life, and she just could not envision a life without her. But the other one, same thing, was a single man, not single, only child, married with kids, but the father had walked out when he was little, and he was only about 50. I think his mom was in her 70s, and he was traumatized. Oh my gosh, traumatized, walking around, didn't know what to say or do, or like just emoting. And I did the same thing, just what I do when I do hospice is talk to the person about who they are, or the person who's passing about who they are, because there's a tendency when someone's ill is to just so focus on the illness. So anyone listening to this, if you have someone passing, they are more than their passing. Give themselves back to themselves and back to you, because talk to them about their lives. They've had amazing experiences. They've done amazing things. They have so many things to offer and say, and no one's asking. I shouldn't say no one. Most people are not asking. And so that leaves the person dying as just a frail individual instead of a complete and whole person. They went to high school. They had their first dance. They got married. They cooked. They cleaned. They went on vacations. They fought. They had amazing experiences. And when someone's passing, it's like all that disappears behind a veil, and then all you have is the dying person. And so I've left so many rooms with people just laughing and joking and talking and being able to let that person, or asking, wow, you did that, and then never knew their parents fought in a war. Like, it's amazing what people don't know about their loved ones. So anyway, I was talking to this gentleman, and I did the same thing, and he starts laughing and talking about all the stories about his mom, and all of a sudden this rainbow ball started showing up above his, like, crystalline reflecting. It was just amazing. I used to get painless migraines, and I sort of see that type of thing, and I thought, am I getting a migraine? And I watched this thing grow and then move to a ring, and inside that ring was the same blue color that I saw when I was in the other world. And it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And this guy was, the bigger this thing got, the more peaceful this man became. And then he just looks over his shoulder and he says the same thing. Mom, I just love you so much, and you don't have to stay here for me anymore. You can go. And then whoosh, her spirit just got right up out of her body, went through this thing. It closed, and she was gone. And he just was completely and utterly peaceful. And I think when people understand that you're never, when you're dying, I've had 2 near death experiences, there's no place where you're unconscious and then you wake up. You're awake through the whole time and rising up out of your body. And it is a fabulous, it's when you say heaven, it's heaven. You can't imagine a more amazing feeling. So when the person you love is dying or you're dying, you're going to have the most amazing experience of your entire life. And most people do not ever want to come back. When that first one, the only reason I wanted to come back was for my children. I didn't want them to find me dead on the floor. So it was that love for someone outside of myself that the Lord granted that I could stay. The second time when I was rising up out of my body, all I could think of, this is the grace of God. This is the grace of God. And it just, like, there was no body to hurt anymore. I felt completely 100% seen and loved. And I think that if we can keep that in our mind when we have people that are passing, that is just such a huge gift, that they're going on a journey that maybe you can't go on with them at this moment. Someday you will. Everyone passes. But that it is just the most beautiful thing they'll ever experience. And the joy in the other world is just outstanding. So
I love that. And it's so, I mean, it's worlds apart from how we tend to think about death, right, in today's society. But what I find really interesting is that in both your stories, and I've heard that before, is that whenever the family member said to the person who was passing, it's okay, you can go, it just happened. So it makes me wonder, how does it work? Like, if somebody is passing, do they then sort of try to hold on because they think, well, I'm going to hurt all these people, they're going to cry? Because we know when we get sick, everybody that loves us, of course they're sad. So imagine being sick with a terminal illness or knowing that you're going to die. Everybody else, as you've rightfully said, it becomes about the sickness, it becomes about the passing, and we tend to forget about the person. Right. So do they tend to hold on more than they should, or resist leaving because of the pain they would cause by leaving?
I think, yes, so when people, they have found when they're in that comatose state, when someone's passing, they can still hear you. So talk to them. They still know, like, lots of times people there might be in that comatose state for a couple days, and then they wake up and say, I can't pass till Johnny comes. So someone has said, oh, Johnny's flying here from California and he'll be on Thursday. They'll wait till Johnny gets there on Thursday to pass. Or they don't want to pass while everyone's in the room. So if someone was lingering for quite a while, I would take everyone down to we had a kitchen where we made homemade cookies and all that stuff and say, let's go get a cup of tea and a cookie and then they would pass within minutes of everyone leaving the room. Because some people, they just cannot pass if the family's there. There's part of them maybe that doesn't quite want to go because they haven't gone yet, so they haven't experienced it, and they're hovering in between this world and the next. So it becomes both ways. Either they're waiting for permission or they need everyone to go, and then that gives them permission. I think we still have a lot of direction, but I think when it's your time to go, it's your time to go. I'm not 100% sure about that. I haven't talked to anyone who really was just, the Lord said, no, it's your time to go, and they're like, no, and they came back anyway against the Lord's wishes. I've always heard that the Lord said, okay, you've had 2 exit points, or even 3. I know people have had 3 and 4 near-death experiences, and each time they were given a choice, because there were things that they were meant to do. And now I was given a huge task to do. This starting this company 11 has been an enormous task. I've been working on, talk about resilience, 8.5 years now, and we are just launching this week. We have been taken down. We've had so many, fraught with so many issues trying to get this launched. Big pharma doesn't want it. There's a lot of people don't want what our platform does. And so that's resilience. Like when the Lord tells you to do something, you do it. It doesn't matter whether you're enjoying it or not, but at the time you do it because it's the directive. The Lord wants healing on this earth. He wants us not to have our brains filled with all this chemicals, like eating the things that we're eating, like polluting the waters and the sky and stuff. With this, our bodies are our temples, and we need to start treating our bodies that way, because a clear mind and a clear heart, a clear body makes clearer choices. You can love the Lord more clearly if you have a sound mind and a sound body. And how do you do that? We have to stop the pollution of everything, from our foods, our drinking water, our skies, you name it. We need to create a different world, and that's one of my goals. But your thing could just be to smile at people, not to react if you have someone, a waitress or someone who's unpleasant to you, a sales clerk at the store. Instead of getting annoyed, ask them if they need a hug. Ask them if they're okay. You seem a little unhappy. Are you okay? Are you upset about something? Is there anything I can do for you? Those little kindnesses make a difference. There's people that have gone out there who are suicidal, and they thought, if one person sees me and says hi to me, I won't commit suicide today. And so all of our actions, it doesn't have to be a big action like I've been required to do. It can be just the little actions. You make a difference in someone else's life every single day if you choose.
Absolutely. And I love that you've made it so accessible and easy for us to do it, because as you say, it doesn't need to be, rocket science, and it doesn't need to be a huge endeavor, but just being a nice and a kind person.
Yep.
If somebody's having a bad day, say, oh, I'm so sorry about that. Can I do anything for you? Or can I just make you a cup of coffee? That teeny weeny small thing. It can go so long for somebody that really struggles during that day. And so often we're busy with everything, we're running around, we just forget to look up, to smile. And I think it's indeed a loss, but it's what makes us human, right? That ability to connect. And I'm always surprised when I take public transport that everybody's just, looking at their phones, and then they avoid eye contact. And whenever I do have eye contact with somebody, I always smile at them, because I think that's just a nice thing to do. And they'll always be a bit shocked, and they'll smile back. but it's such a small thing, and I've noticed it also makes my day. I would sometimes leave meetings being angry or upset, and I would just travel back home, with a really not happy face, just thinking like, oh, why did that have to happen? And when somebody smiled at me, I was like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Like, I'm still alive. Like, it's still okay. Like, we can figure that out. That wasn't the best meeting, perhaps. Sure, fine. But it helps put things in perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you're having that, the meeting doesn't go well, or the family member, your mother said something to you that always irritates you, or it's still getting back to how can I say this in a different way, because your brain doesn't know the difference between what is really happening and what you tell it is. So if you take like the Olympic skiers down the slopes, if it's a bad day and they can't ski, their coaches have them pretend like they're skiing. The brain doesn't know the difference. It honestly doesn't. And so when you're telling yourself, I'm miserable, I had a horrible day, that was a terrible meeting, blah, 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 your brain, and every time you tell yourself that same story, your brain reinforces it like it just happened. So if you're telling yourself the same miserable story 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times a day, then your brain is now living that you're miserable. If you tell yourself, I'm courageous, how can I understand what that person was going through? Let me tell myself a different thing about the meeting. How could I, if someone gave me $1,000,000 to tell that story about that terrible meeting in a positive way, what would I say? Because you can find, for $1,000,000, you would find some way where you could see the person's other side of it or whatever. And so that's what gets me through things. It doesn't mean that I'm not irritated for a moment, but I really have what's it called? A way of doing things where I've set myself up for, how could I reword that? How could I have said that different? Why is that person irritated? How could my behavior change that? And quite often it's because people don't feel seen and they don't feel heard. And so how could I acknowledge that person where they feel seen and heard? Not that I'm a yes man, because I'll still stay, I am a very strong, opinionated human being. But there's a way of telling your opinion where people can hear it in a way of not. And that's a hard lesson to learn. And it really takes self-reflection of going back and saying, how could I do that differently? And I think in this day and age, we're putting everything, it's always somebody else's fault. And if you're pointing that finger that it's always somebody else's fault, whether you hit someone with a car, I mean, it's amazing how many people, they should have, they should, but what about you? How could you have done it differently? And so that's the thing that I live by. It's the only reason that gets me through 14 children and 34 grandchildren. It's like that it's a lot of work. And running this company, like, I've never run a company before. I don't know anything about web design or anything. Right off of this, I'm getting into a meeting where I have to discuss all this web design. I don't know anything about it. So it's research and thing. It's like, okay, what do I need to know now? How do I need to up my game? And it's just like, instead of saying, oh my gosh, I have to do this, I thought, well, the Lord has confidence in me and he thinks I'm capable. How do I do this next step? It doesn't seem fun on the outside of it, but it's looking towards what can be the amazing outcome that I get to be a part of. And we all get to be a part of something. You can volunteer for anything. You can volunteer to clean up your city, to go to meetings, to run Reiki shares, to do hospice, be a lactation consultant. It doesn't matter. Like, most of my life has been a volunteer aspect. And it's finding the joy in things like that.
I love it. And I think, when you were talking about running a company and not having done that before, I think often enough it's also getting out of your own way and and that's what I do as well with my business. Is I always think, what am I messing up today and how can I mess up a bit less? And it's always, I also think one of the biggest things is not taking yourself too seriously or not emphasizing that enough. I tend to be quite a control freak. And to be fair, when I started this podcast, which would be maybe 10 months ago, 9 months ago, and I was the last person that wanted to be visible on camera. I was the last person because I don't want to be an influencer. I'm a very private person. I don't necessarily want people to know of me or to see me. So then I thought, well, why would I be doing this? And it just seemed that the mission was so big that I thought, well, listen, at the end of the day, it's not about me. It's just about the stories that can come to light, and it's about the inspiration that helps people move forward. And I'm just a teeny tiny part in that big wheel that sets those things in motion. So why am I making this so big in my head? Why am I thinking, well, yeah, what if I don't have makeup on? Or do I even look good on camera? Because I bet everybody watching is not even thinking of this.
Right.
They're just thinking, about what they can take away and what they can apply to their lives and how they can have a bit more hope moving forward. And when you put things into that perspective, I think, as you've said, then it really makes the web design and the small little tasks that you have to get through, it makes it more manageable.
Yes, absolutely. Keep your eye in the bigger picture and be of service. I think that's a huge thing. I honor you for stepping into that. That's what we need people to be. It's like get out of your own way and out of your own fears and really step into the possibilities, because the possibilities are endless.
That's very true. So tell me about your platform that you're launching this week. I didn't know it was launching, but congratulations. I mean, it's a massive feat to have made it so far. So it's absolutely amazing. For everybody that wants to check it out and that wants to support you in that mission, what can they find there and how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, we did a soft launch in the beginning of this summer, and then we've been working out the bugs. And it's called 11. I didn't come up with the name. It was, so how this came about is I was a doula for this couple, Brian and Rachel, and 63 hours of labor. And Brian and I and Rachel became very close. And 2 years later, Brian wanted to experience energy work. And he'd never had experienced anything holistic in his entire life. He was a little nervous, didn't know what to do about it. So I invited him over. He didn't want candles and drumming and anything. He just wanted straight up hands-on healing. So 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I had my sister Susan come over, and we put Brian on the table, and we were doing reconnection and Reiki on him. And he got off the table being able to see auras, astral travel. Like, he had the most profound experience, which I think was directly from God, because that's how 11 started. And for the whole week, he was like, "This is amazing." This is like, he was out of his head. Like, I kept on having to ground him in his body. And I was like, "Well, Brian, why don't you come back over on Friday?" And this was Thursday night. And I really need to like put you back in your body. And he's like, "Everyone should have access to Reiki. Why don't we do a Reiki app?" And at that point, like, the top of my head like blew off, and the Lord just downloaded this entire program. It is not from me; it's 100% from God. When Brian and Susan showed up the next day, we started. I put forth this whole idea. It's, think of Airbnb for holistic health. So instead of houses, you're looking at modalities. And so it's free for everyone to get on. So clients, you can peruse all the different modalities. We have blogs and a healing library. You can look at different practitioners. So what we do is we connect holistic practitioners and clients together, because most clients cannot find a holistic practitioner easily. It's very hard to find Reiki masters or Qigong or anything. You really have to search and search and search. And when you find, then how do you know who they are? With a practitioner, you're getting free advertising. They can create their whole profile, set up how much they charge, their own calendar, what hours, all the payments done right through our site. And so I think it's yellow pages for holistic health. So you can get on our site and search in your area for practitioners. You will be able to. We're just onboarding practitioners now. And so the more people that find out about us, the better this company will be. And the Lord came up with the name 11. And the last E in 11 is a 3 for the Trinity. So it's ELEV3N.com. And it's a Christian based company. And our goal is to be global and to be the largest database of holistic health in the world. So if you're suffering from something, how do you heal yourself with stuff in your kitchen? So a lot of it's like all the healing library and blogs and everything are going to be free. So if you have ways of healing your body naturally, like putting a cabbage leaf on a wound or something like that, write to us. Send us your information. If you have written papers on different ways of healing, contact us. You can go to elev3n.com, ELEV3N.com, and go to our contact page, sign up for a client, sign up to be a practitioner, and nothing comes out of your pocket unless money is coming in. So if a practitioner, if someone books a practitioner, then we take 11% to keep the platform going. They get to keep 89%. And so we want to change the world of how people see health and wellness. It's like we are so used to just taking a pill. You get sick, you go to the doctor, you take a pill, you take a pill. I believe that doctors have stopped being doctors and are just pill pushers. Like I have not gone to a doctor, I rarely go, but anyone in our family where someone has suggested something other than take a pill. With all my husband's problems he's had with the stroke and everything, not one neurologist or heart doctor or anything has given us anything to do. Not one. They just, and me from my own study have found out when my husband, like he didn't know what a wall or a door or names for anything. So he called me Dolores and him Walter. We don't even know Dolores and Walter. So we joke about that. But no, I'd say Laurie. He'd say Dolores. I'd say Laurie. He would call something like some weird name for a wall, and I would say wall. So what you do is you repeat back the word that they're saying, and then you say the correct word. And just that taught him to talk faster than any of the doctors had ever seen. So why do they not just do the doctors and neurologists say, when they're repeating the wrong word, repeat the wrong word back to them and then tell them the right word, because that actually triggers the brain. No one said that. Not one doctor. And so that's the type of information that we want on our site. We want to be like the Amazon of holistic health, your go-to place where you can heal. Like laundry detergent. So much of the laundry detergent is so poisonous, and your skin is the largest organ on your body. How do you make your own laundry detergent? It's so easy. Stop using dryer sheets. Dryer sheets are toxic poison. There you can get wool balls to put in your dryers. There's so many things that you can do other than the poison. And I know it's a big ask to change your life. So just do one thing. Like people get overwhelmed with, I don't even know how to do this. Change one thing. Make your own laundry detergent or your own deodorant. I use Young Living's, their Dentadrome toothpaste as deodorant. I've made my own deodorants. I have own deodorant recipes on the site. They work great for other people, but they don't necessarily always work well for me. I use just a little bit of the toothpaste. It's all holistic. It has essential oils in it, and it is by far the best thing. It has nothing bad for you, and the essential oils get rid of any of the bacteria under your arms. It's simple things like that. It's like choose one thing until you're comfortable with it, and then add something else until you're comfortable with it. Add something else. Do you know that skin cancer was not a thing until suntan lotions were invented? So all doctors had to keep a journal about everyone they saw and what they did for it. A doctor would see maybe one or two things of skin cancer a year, and now they see 5 or 6 a day. And that all started when suntan lotion was invented. Don't use suntan lotion. There's beautiful things that you can do. You can actually, none of our family even uses the homemade deodorant, suntan lotion anymore because our skins all has adapted to it. There's ways that you can adapt your skin to the sun, and there's things that you can put in that, like coconut oil with lavender and zinc oxide and stuff in it, that that is healthy for your skin. Because if you read the thing on suntan lotion, it has a chemical nightmare on it, like the list, and you're rubbing that in your skin and then you're baking it into your skin. That causes horrendous damage to internal organs and to your skin. So things like that, that's what we want to change with 11. We want to change how people view health and wellness. And then once we get going, we need funding. So if anyone wants to go to our site, there's a Venmo donation button at the bottom. If you're really interested, we're looking for investors, so you can contact us. We're looking for people to write articles. We're looking for people to just spread the word. Like, we want to change the world, how people see health and wellness. If you're a practitioner, you don't see the modality that you practice on your site, contact us. Tell us about what you do. We have people contacting us all the time. We're adding new modalities continuously. I think we're up to 60 some modalities on there now. And the next iteration will be an app and a marketplace. How do we get the things that we need to heal ourselves naturally and organically? And so that will be, after we get this really up and going, that will be the next one.
So you've definitely got quite enough to keep you busy for the coming years. It sounds like your agenda is set.
It is. And it's hard and it's confusing and it's wonderful and it's of service, and everyone works on our team for free at the moment, and we have for years. And we really look at 11 as a gift to the world, is to be able to change, humanity in some aspect.
It definitely is. And thank you for the work that you've done together with your partners as well, because you weren't alone in this. And I can imagine it has cost a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money as well to get this going. Yes. For sure. And I'm pretty sure it was not easy. I'm convinced it wasn't. But I do absolutely believe in your mission, and I think it's the most amazing thing that we can have, that, the things that are good for us and good to us are just available, and we don't have to look so hard on the internet, or it's always so difficult to find something that's good for you. Even in the supermarket, the produce aisle is so small, and then the junk aisles are ridiculously big. So it's always like making those right choices for us, for our bodies. It's just the least we can do, I think. So thank you so much for your mission and for providing us with all of this.
Thank you so much for your platform, where you're getting things like this out there in the world. But we need people like you so dearly. Like that. This is how we're going to change the world. One person at a time. No one's going to do it all by themselves. But if we all form a community and all take some aspect, from the little tiny minute things to do to the great big projects, it all needs to be done. And that's what I think is just amazing, is that we're all connecting and stepping up together to do this.